Hello racers! Welcome back. Today we will be talking about few decks that we think will get much more play in the set when Force Throw is banned. So let's talk about Han 1. Force Throw hurt him, I think, the most out of every single leader, because as a leader, Han is really susceptible for discard and leader removal, and Force Throw was basically 2-in-1. So you could either hit his hand, or you could just stop him completely from deploying. So without Force Throw, I think it's really easy to predict that he will be at least part of the meta. And in this video, we will be showing you how to build him in every single color, what are the pros and cons of each one. So let's start with Han Blue.
Yeah, so Han Blue, so far in early testing, Han Blue is such a huge force. Like the fact that you can enable enable Anakin's -6/-6 without literally much of a commitment, because you can resource a villainy card, and then with Han's ability at the start of the regroup phase you can just destroy it. So you can very easily get a villainy card on your discard. Han Blue on his own is very powerful, and the fact that you can use Han's ability on 5 resources to get to the 6 resources. You don't even need to gamble with the flip to get to 7 resources, because Anakin already costs 6. And if you manage to gamble and don't get punished by some sort of removal or answer to Han, you can even play something like Luke, which is already also a very powerful choice that you can make on 7 resources. And Han Blue already in the previous sets was quite decent, but this set enabled a lot of gave him a lot of power in early stages of the game, which that was lacking previously. The fact that we have Sage, Yaddle, those units can help you in early game. And you might be wondering about the force base in this deck, but the reason why the force base is here, even though the only force payoffs are Internet Warrior and Chirrut, those two cards are just very powerful, and even if you just get one trigger out of Internet Warrior, you heal for 3 HP, so you're already getting more value than if you would have played the 30 HP base. And the early force units like Sage, like Yaddle, they're just very good units, so you would probably play them even without the force base. You could replace them with L3, but it's not as big of a commitment.
Yeah, and the second big part is also, compared to previous sets, you actually have a good 6 drops, because Deepa is also a really safe play before you flip, and she also needs an answer. So your opponent will need to choose if they want to answer Han or Deepa. This is also one of the Hans that has access to card draw, because Yoda is a really good turn 1 play. Because as a turn 1 play, with his ability, he basically doesn't have a drawback of being understated. And one of the additional parts why Force for me is a good choice is also the fact that after sideboard you have access to Daughter, which is one of the best answers for space decks that we currently have, because the constant -2 damage that you get on your base after every single attack, and playing a versus Vader, it can be even healing, because every single 1 attack power can heal you for 2, makes it just worth it. It's only 2 HP, and even with one, as Sip said, 1 trigger with either Warrior or Chirrut makes it a net benefit. Additional part that I think changed a lot since previous sets with this one is Grogu, because it gave you an answer for one of your worst matchups, which were Tarkin Town decks. So for me, this is one of the strongest Han lists that you can play currently, and a lot of people may say that you play only the villainous cards for Anakin, but actually with Han, Power of the Black Sword for 5 is often one of the better plays, because then you can follow up with Anakin, leave the board empty. So this is really it has answers to almost any deck in the meta, and can play up really well. It only struggles versus I think villainous soft hard control decks.
Yep. So going to the prawns, like we already kind of covered those. So like we mentioned, Anakin, just very good card. Han Blue is really good against the aggro decks in general. The reason for that is because you have healing, you have a lot of anti-aggro mechanism, so that makes him very good into those matchups. He doesn't really rely on Han Flip turn as much. By Han Flip turn, we mean getting to 7 resources and cheating out 7 drop on 5 resources. This deck doesn't really rely on that as much just because you have the Anakin. Also, the deck has healing and removal, which other decks don't have as easy. Other versions of Han Blue don't really have that easy of access to. So we have the power, fell, and regarding the cons, we have the weaker early game. Like you still play units that are like okay statted, but they have a few issues like stat line wise. The deck doesn't really push much damage, which can be an issue when you play against like the slower matchups when you play against control. And also he's still vulnerable to discard to some extent, just because this deck doesn't really have that much card draw. So if you play like against deck that plays pillage, for instance, something like Anakin, the discard can be a little bit problematic for this deck.
Yeah, exactly. So it basically comes up to you have a really good mid to late game. Your early game can be exploited, and it's really hard for you to close the games with damage. You basically close most of the games with the value you get from your power plays, so from Anakin, Depa, and Luke. Okay, so let's go to like the most popular one. I will move myself so you can see the whole deck. So hand green Data Vault, I think will be the most common one, and we build it as the mostly pilot deck early that can transition to like big threats late game. And from all of the hands, I think this one is the most polarized. It can be extremely powerful. It can close games really quickly, and versus certain decks, you feel like you don't have any answers for like Millennium Falcon turn 1, Chewbacca turn 2. But at the same time, if you are ready for this deck, it can be countered pretty easily.
Yeah, like out of all of the hands, like this is one of the versions that like got the least new changes, like the Caleran, Obi, like those cards are definitely powerful. Having an option to play Caleran 7 if you manage to get to some resources during the hand flip turn, that can be a very powerful line, especially if finding Obi-Wan with him is quite strong. Obi is pretty decent Sentinel to play with home 1, so like you have very good Sentinel with that, and you don't need to rely on something like Echo-based Defender as much. Obi-Wan obviously has his downside, the fact that if you didn't play a Force unit during that round, he doesn't have the Sentinel, but to be fair with Obi-Wan, like the most important fact is that once you play him, during that specific round when you played him, he has the Sentinel, like that's the most important part about him. And yeah, like I mentioned, there are Han Green is still solid, but like Baton kind of mentioned, the deck can be countered still by anti-upgrades and like anti-ramp tools, stuff like Chem, Fang Fighters, and things like that.
Yeah. So like the biggest benefit is of course the value. I think there's not many decks that can push as much power from a single card as Han. Like one Caleran late game can put entire board if you manage to like put home one. But at the same time, it also is extremely good at racing because turn 1 Millennium, turn 2 Chewbacca can end the game even before hand flip sometimes. And the last really big pro for the deck is that it has a lot of smuggle. It is not as easy to counter with discard, but at the same time, it is easy to counter if you have enough upgrade removal and things to answer hand flip. because green doesn't have as many good 6-drops. So he rely on the 7 mana flip much more than any other Han variant. And lastly, it is kind of easy to beat him if you can outrace him because his removal is really limited. It's basically only waylays and stuff that can tap your units. So if you can build a big unit or play a big unit early, if you're going into the racing situation, you can outrace him because it will be really hard for him to remove your big stuff. Okay, next let's talk about Han Red.
Yeah, so we have 100. 100 is another deck that was already played in the past a little bit, but like the force base gives him quite a few new additions that make him even better. The most notable example is the Kiadi, the 4 cost from the
Legends of the
Legends.
Force.
Yes. So like in this deck, like if you think about it, he is a kind of a card that you can play alter to as a 4 mana for 4 that will give you net positive 1 card, because if you use Han's ability to get 1 resource, you lose 1 card in hand, you play Kiadi, you draw 2, so in the end you're 1 card up, you play the 4/4, so that's already pretty strong, and you can always play him as a 4 mana for 4 later in the game. And like generally drawing cards for Han is definitely a very good thing. The force units in this deck are pretty strong. They have the Queen Nun, Adi. This deck overall is very good at pushing damage. Like this, out of all the versions, this deck can push probably the biggest amount of damage. Maybe yellow is kind of close, but like when you compare him to green and blue version, this deck definitely pushes more damage. I guess Data Vault can go like pilot, like Millennium double pilot on it, but like this play can be heavily punished, and this deck doesn't really. It's not as much all in as the like this pilot version of pilot route of Han Data Vault.
Yeah, exactly. The amount of damage from hand from this deck is also like the big pro for it, because it has a really good matchup in versus the slower decks. Because whenever your opponent goes for removal, you can always just, oh, I will play Millennium, I will play Vanestra, I will play K2, or even like Mace sometimes can just push damage out of nowhere. And Red also has, for me, the safest flip, because you don't rely on the flip at all. I often, when I play this deck, flip just for my opponent to waste their turn removing Han. Then I still have 6 mana. I can play 2 units that enters untapped and just finish the game. It also has like arm to the teeth and blasters that can be also played for 1. So damage from hand is the biggest power of this deck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like regarding the pros, like we have the smuggle, and in this deck surprisingly it's mostly red smuggle, so with Cassian, the Arm to the Teeth, very powerful smuggle cards, strong racing, so kinda like you mentioned, like this deck can race quite a lot. Card draw from Kiadi mostly, and having access to Poe on 4 resources also is a very powerful line that this deck can go for. Poe is a very powerful card. He doesn't have the instant impact, but if you can play him 1 round earlier, he can be very powerful just because of that, because how much value he gets from the on attack. Regarding the cons, it struggles versus ECL, and like overall against decks that are reactive. So like ECL is the best example, just because the opponent can ECL his 5-drop, kill your hand, and kind of stop your aggression. This deck is not the best at handling that. Also, limited removal. This deck doesn't have like cards like Fall the Dragon to remove bigger threats, so it kind of needs to be super fast and close the game rather quickly. And also, pillars are a little bit problematic just because it doesn't have that many great answers to those.
Yeah, you have those answers in sideboard, but pilots can. You basically need to raise them before sideboard, and then you can put after sideboard you have more answers to them. But it's really hard to have those answers in main because your deck is really polarized into being really aggressive, and the answers for pilots are really reactive cards that it's really hard to keep versus any other matchup than pilots. And lastly, the most popular for the most sets, so Han Blue. We decided to build him as
Han Yellow, not Han Blue.
Han Yellow. We decided to build him as a space aggro deck. I think this is the safest choice at the moment. It's a tempo deck. It doesn't really get much from the new set. It basically didn't get anything.
There's only Grogu for Boba Data Vault,
Yeah.
but that's the only thing, more or less.
But the deck was really powerful before, so it's not like the deck got weaker. The meta was just really unfavored for it, so this deck is still powerful now because I think with the meta changes, it will benefit the tempo play a little bit. This is like if you would name this deck in one thing, it would be a tempo deck. It's the most tempo as you can be. It will tap, it will get benefit, it will bounce your stuff, it will generate negative value in most of the turns, but during that it would also push a lot of damage. But as I said before, it doesn't really get much of the new cards. The only big card is Grogu, but it's a sideboard card versus a specific counters versus Tarkin Town decks and Boba 4.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So overall, with the pros, like we already mentioned, like this, the deck can play first of all discard strategy. It has access to Body Rook. It also combines that with Spark of Rebellion, Kira, Ahsoka. So this deck can go for the hand control strategy. Tempo, like that's definitely the most important thing about this deck, that it can raise, but it also is really good at stopping your opponent from dealing damage to you in a short term. Also quite strong versus aggro because of that. And regarding the cons, this deck is not really great at generating value. Like all of those tempo cards, bounce type of effects are giving the card back to your opponent's hand. So in the long run, the fact that they get extra cards because of those bounces makes the games really tough. Even though we have the discard, it can be difficult to win some of the longer games because of that. And this deck can be also countered because it's kind of linear when it comes to what it wants to do.
Yeah, exactly. So let's lastly talk about what we think are the best versions of Han and what we would recommend playing. So we both think Blue has the biggest power level and is also I think it will be the best fit for the meta that we will have. The Anakin is just for some decks it's just a wall that it's unbeatable, and because of that I think it's a clear favorite, at least for me. For the second and third place, we couldn't really decide on which deck is better, because they play completely differently. Red is super aggressive. It has really good matchups into decks that other hands don't really fight well. But at the same time, it can struggle versus aggressive strategies. And green, on the other hand, if your opponent doesn't expect it, if your opponent is not prepared to counter it, it's one of the most unbeatable decks in the game. But if you do have the answers, it can be really easily stopped, which was also the problem in the previous meta. And on the fourth spot is yellow. I think it's a little bit worse at everything than the other three versions. And also, I don't think the tempo is as important in the current meta. I think we will be more into the value meta going forward without the force through.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think it's kind of a no-brainer that Han Blue is the best. And regarding the Han one with red and Han one with green, those decks are quite close when it comes to power level. I personally currently think that green is gonna be better. Beton thinks that it's red, but they are definitely close. Like They are definitely close in the power level, so like we'll see. But like definitely Han Blue so far is the deck to beat, and Han Yellow is probably needs Teal to wait. Like the DJ ban just hurt him so much.
Yeah. Okay. And lastly, we would like to thank our Patreons. Let me move Sip out of the way. We are like celebrating the first month of the Patreons of the Patreon. We are really glad how it's going. The community is constantly growing. This week we will be releasing the fifth written guide. It will be for decks that you should look at in the new meta, and I think it will be something that can be really great to like find yourself in the meta that will be completely different because more than half of the decks got changed without the force throw.
Yep. So yeah, thank you everyone for watching, and see you next time.
See ya.